This is Radio TV Phono Nut, and here we have a package that just came in the mail from none other than Shango066. He sent me a message the other day and told me to expect something, so here it is. I have no idea what's in the box. I don't think it's anything live. I don't hear anything moving around in it. So let's feel around the box and see if I can determine what it is. I feel a handle here. Could it possibly be a phonograph? And could it possibly be one that's not in a box? Yeah, I think he wrapped it in this specially designed heavy-duty brown paper that's supposed to withstand any kind of abuse that the shipping carriers can dish out. Alright, we have our Country Crock privacy protection device over the address label. I paid $19.95 for that off of one of those TV mail order thingies, and I can tell you it's really come in handy for protecting the privacy of the people who send me stuff and myself, as far as keeping our addresses out of the spotlight. Alright, let's take our package opening device and let's see if we can get this thing open and see what we got here. And look under here real quick. Well, something looks kind of orangey or red under there. Okay. No, it's actually blue. It's blue. It's blue. It's blue. Could this be what I think it is? It's hard to do this one-handed. Okay, this looks like the Symphonic record player that he recently did a video on. Whoa, more tape. Okay, there we go. All of the wrapping is off of it. Now the outside case appears to be in undamaged condition, but you know, like I said, he used this specially designed brown packing paper. I think it's only available to him. I think he has an inside track on where to get that stuff. So I wouldn't recommend anybody else doing that. If anybody else is going to ship a record player, you probably should put it inside of a box with plenty of padding around it to make sure it doesn't get damaged. Okay, we have stuff rattling around in the bottom. Alright, let's open it up and see what we got. Let's see if anything flies out of here when I open the lid. Symphonic Child's record player, 3-speed from the 1960s. Tube, brand new cartridge, only $35. Alright, here's our specially designed piece of styrofoam to prevent the tone arm from coming loose and having sexual contact with the turntable platter while in transit. And he did tape the tone arm down. Okay. Alright, let's get a screwdriver and open this up and see what's rattling around inside of it. Okay, what appears to be rattling around in the bottom is the output tube that came dislodged from the socket. Sounded like something else just fell off and hit the ground. Yeah, so yeah, this tube it's done for. It needs to be replaced. That won't be no problem. We should have some of those in stock. Okay, this is what we got. Someone has already worked on this, and I remember it being like this in the Shango video, so this wasn't done by him. Looks like they replaced the electrolytic capacitors with whatever they had on hand and left everything else that needs to be replaced. But don't worry, we will fix this amplifier and make it look professional like it's supposed to look. And we will replace this tone arm with something that's more period correct. This is a 1970s or 80s universal replacement tone arm for a kiddie record player. Back in the day, you could get these out of catalogs for a couple of dollars, and they came with a pickup cartridge already installed, so when the cartridge went bad in one of these, most shops just changed the whole tone arm, but we will replace that with something more period correct. All jokes aside, this record player was packed as a demonstration as how not to ship a record player. And it proves how durable these things are, because even though this was just wrapped in brown paper, it still survived relatively undamaged, except for the tube falling out of the socket and getting busted, but that's an easy problem to fix. So, you know, if you're going to ship one of these, don't ship it that way. For heaven's sake, put the thing in a box and put plenty of padding around it. And let it and so it has plenty of protection. Oh, and by the way, this drive mechanism is made by BSR. This is not the usual General Industries or Alliance motor. And it appears to be a nice one. It has idler wheel retract when you turn it off. Okay, we're going to get the Symphonic on the bench momentarily, but first we have to get this one off the bench, but fortunately I'm almost through with it. I need to oil the motor and all that, and this one ought to be ready to go. And by the way, this is a GE Party Mate from 1968. It's a 4-speed manually operated job. It's in the same kind of case and uses the same amp as the automatic Swing Mate models. The main thing that was wrong with this was the cartridge was bad, and I replaced it with a new old stock cartridge. It's actually a better cartridge than the one that came out of it. It's a Ronette cartridge, and it actually sounds pretty good for what it is. Here's the motor all pulled apart. We're just going to clean it with alcohol like we've done a million others in the past, and then lubricate it with the Zoom spout oil. Put it all back together, and this thing ought to be ready to go. Okay, so we have it all back together. Now, why in the devil isn't it giving me audio? Now, believe it or not, what you're hearing here is needle talk, and that constitutes working condition for some eBay sellers. So I'm really kind of glad that happened. It kind of gives us an example of what working means. You take it with a grain of salt. Oh, so that's what happened. One of my cartridge connectors came loose. Okay, that's better. Now keep in mind, this is not meant to get very loud. When I turn it up as it is, you can hear it distort, which means this cartridge is driving that amp as hard as it can. Yeah, I guess we'll clean this one up and list it for sale on eBay if anybody's interested. I mean, the cabinet's in decent shape. It's not cracked or busted or anything.
Pokey, pokey, poke, where's Pokey? Pokey, 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 poke, where's Pokey?
Where's that Pokey?
puppy, little puppy.
Okay, if anybody wants this, it's available. Okay, now that the GE is no longer hogging the workbench, we can concentrate on this Symphonic. And let's see, where do I want to begin with this? I guess we'll start by neatening up this amplifier a little bit. And one thing I want to do, you'll notice they have the speaker connected to the leads coming directly out of the output transformer via wire nuts. This is the kind of wire that breaks if you're not careful as far as flexing it. And I've had them break right up here where it goes into the audio output transformer. So I think what we're going to do is redesign that. We're going to remove this that they have wire nutted in place. And of course we know that didn't come from the factory that way. And we're going to mount a terminal strip on the chassis, connect our output transformer leads to the terminal strip, and then connect wires from the terminal strip down to the speakers. And that way we won't have to worry about any stress being placed on these audio output transformer leads and them breaking off. And this is an example why you want to be careful when you find something somewhere that's advertised as working or restored or has been serviced or whatever, because you don't know how well it's been serviced. I can't tell you how many things have come my way over the years that have supposed to have been professionally restored, but it ended up being a hack job like this, and I ended up having to fix somebody else's screw up. So you always want to keep that in mind when you're buying something. Make sure you're buying it from a reputable restoration person, and there's plenty of them out there. You just have to know which ones they are. I don't know when this was made. I hadn't found any date code yet, but I'm guessing very late 50s or very early 60s, but even then there were some Japanese parts starting to creep into the mix. As you can see on these volume and tone controls, they're clearly marked as Japan. So yeah, and Symphonic was a relatively low-end company. They were like everybody else. They made some decent stuff, and then they made some low-end stuff. This one here would be considered more towards the lower end of the line, but for a one-tube wonder, it is, you know, they did put some effort into it. Okay, found a date code on the audio output transformer, 38th week of 61, which means this record player was probably made in late 61 or early 62. It's probably considered a 62 model. Okay, there's our terminal strip, so we've eliminated any strain on the output transformer leads. I just need to solder my speaker wires, and that'll be taken care of. Well, that'll probably be one of the last things we do. Now, we need to determine what tube this uses, since there's no schematic in the record player. And just looking at it, I believe a 25C5 is what we need, and this is how I know that. This is one of those that uses a 90-volt phono motor in series with a tube filament, so putting a 25-volt tube in series with the motor would give us 115 volts, and our cathode resistor is 150 ohm. Now if this was a 25EH5, I believe they usually use something like an 82 ohm on that tube. Since this one uses 150 ohm, we're going to dig through the tube stash and find us a 25C5. But before we do that, let's neaten this up a bit and kind of see what they did. For our audio output tube cathode bypass, they used a 22 microfarad 450 volt. That'll work, but it's overkill. And there's also the possibility that since that capacitor is only going to see maybe no more than 10 volts, which is way less than what this capacitor is rated for, this old capacitor could just dry up and fail from not receiving anything close to the proper amount of working voltage that it's rated for. And there's no need in using a 450 volt cap in a low voltage circuit like this. This cap can be used in something that's more suited for a 450 volt cap, like the power supply filter in a 1930s radio. So we'll take that out and put a 22 microfarad 50 volt in there. This capacitor here is an 82 microfarad 450 volt. Looks like something that was salvaged out of a TV. This is our second filter capacitor. Once again, it'll get the job done, but there's no sense in using a 450 volt capacitor when a 250 volt capacitor will do. The microfarad value is not that critical. We could probably go with anything from a 47 microfarad on up in this application. Here's our first filter capacitor that's coming right off of the one I just mentioned here with the red wire on it. This is our first filter capacitor off of the selenium rectifier, so scratch what I said earlier. This is the second one, a 47 microfarad 400 volt. Once again, it'll get the job done, but there's no need in using such a great working voltage when it's not needed. More than likely, whoever fixed this or tried to fix it just used whatever they had in their junk box to fix it absolutely as cheaply as possible. And to be fair, this is not the worst hack job I've ever seen. At least they did go to the effort of putting heat shrink tubing on the capacitor leads, and you can tell they had this adhered somewhere at one time, even though it came loose. That might have happened in shipping, I don't remember. I'll have to go back and watch his video and see if it's dangling down in his video. So I mean, like I said, this is heat shrunk. They obviously just soldered it on to the existing filter capacitor wires. But you know, this is, to be fair, like I said, not the worst hack job, but it could stand to be neater. And of course, these capacitors are going to have to go, and we'll check these resistors and make sure they're within tolerance. Well, that just broke off, so it wasn't soldered too good. And here's our terminal strip where our new capacitors are going to go. Okay, we have our filter capacitors replaced, mounted on terminal strips this time. 82 and a 68 and a 33 microfarad 50 volt for our cathode. Still need to replace this capacitor. Here's our AC line safety capacitor. As you can tell, this is looking much neater than the way it looked when it came here. There's our tone capacitor replaced, and that takes care of all the capacitors. Alright, it's Wednesday about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I've got some other obligations. We'll get back on this later. Okay, it's Wednesday night. We've got a little time to mess with this some more. And here's a weird placement of a resistor. This is a 10 ohm resistor, 10 ohm half watt. It reads 51 ohms, which obviously it's way up. It's in series with the motor coming into here. And then coming out goes to pin 4, which is a filament pin of the 25C5, and of course pin 3 is the other end of the filament pin. It goes to circuit ground. So I find it kind of odd that they'd have this resistor in series with that. But with it being 51 ohms and not 10, that's obviously starving the filament of some voltage, so we'll put a 10 ohm resistor back in there. Okay, I just did something that I rarely ever do. I don't condone this practice, but I just jumped out this resistor with a piece of wire. I've worked on a lot of record players over the years. I've never seen anything like this. The motor is generally running straight into the filament of the tube. And with this being only a 10 ohm half watt resistor, it can't be dropping that much. I'd have to do the math, but what, maybe a volt or less? I don't even know why they put it in here unless they just had a bunch of 10 ohm half watt resistors they didn't know anything to do with, and they needed a jumper instead of running the motor wire directly through all this mess over to the tube filament. They just chose to have a resistor here to jumper from here to here. Well, I just jumped it out with a piece of wire. I see no harm at all in doing that. Okay, a couple other resistors that are a little iffy, but they're not iffy enough that I'm going to worry about them. This 10K, it reads about 13K. That's your screen supply resistor. 3K in a tube circuit, that won't be enough to cause any problems. And this resistor here, a 68K, goes from the center of the volume control over to the screen grid, the control grid of the output tube. It's reading about 80K. That's not a critical application, that's just the signal feed from the volume control to the output tube. So I think we're just about to the point of digging up a 25C5 and sticking it in here and seeing what happens. And I may or may not replace this selenium rectifier. You know, it depends on all these mood swings I've been having here lately. 5 minutes from now I might decide to just go ahead and replace it with a silicon diode. I don't know. Okay, we have the amp working. The drive mechanism could probably stand to be taken apart and cleaned and lubricated, but it works as it is. I do need to replace this tone arm with something more period correct, and I think this cartridge is either bad or it's too low of output for this record player. This record player needs a 3-volt crystal cartridge, and I don't think this one's giving us that much. It'll play a 78 okay, but it skips on more modern records, and we can't have that. This is some cheap wobbly tone arm anyway, but it works.
Where's Pokey? Pokey, 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 pokey. Where's Pokey?
Where's that pokey little puppy?
The earth beats and the 3 little puppies in the pet shop. A lady came into the pet shop. A lady came into the pet shop.
Alright, before we condemn the cartridge, let's check the voltages in the amplifier and make sure they're what they should be. Okay, I'm getting 110 going into the output transformer, 88 on the screen, and about 5 on the cathode. That's a little low, but it shouldn't be low enough to give us that much of a decrease in volume if the cartridge and all that was okay. So I think this is fixed as good as it's going to get fixed for right now. I'm going to have to dig up a proper tone arm and cartridge for this, and we'll do the preventative maintenance on the drive mechanism. But you know, we've done that a jillion times in the past. We don't have to dedicate a video to that. You know, I've cleaned and lubricated one drive mechanism. I've cleaned and lubricated all of them. So it's playing this album fine, but then again, this is not a bass-intensive rock record. Yeah, I think that idler wheel's got a little bump in it, but that shouldn't be a problem. I've got BSR idler wheels on junk record changers. So as you can hear, this does not do well for bass-intensive records. This tone arm is almost just like some of the ones that were on the later Audiotronics classroom record players, and they just don't do. They're not very good quality tone arms, and they don't do well with these low compliance crystal cartridges. So, with all that said, I've done about all I can do to this for now. For all intents and purposes, it's fixed. I need to obtain a tone arm with a proper crystal cartridge in it, and then we ought to be ready to go. But the moral of all this, it survived even though it was packed very poorly, but the next one that's packed poorly might not survive, so it's best not to take any chances and cut corners. If you ship one of these to somebody and want to get it there in one piece, you need to pack it properly, because you just don't need to take chances, especially if it's something you're selling to somebody. You know, it's like some of these eBay clowns that I deal with that I've had to get money back on because they poorly packed something. And, you know, that's just stupid on their part. I mean, why cut corners packing on something and have the item arrive damaged and the carrier won't pay a claim because it's not packed right, and then you have to cough up the money out of your PayPal account. Now, personally, I don't like doing that. Once I get money in my hands, I want it to stay in my hands. So we're going to pack whatever it is I'm sending out to survive.
To get in, it don't take much though. Well, you can really do just that. Oh yeah, got neon sign outside the set. Come in and take a look at your mind. You'll be surprised, but you
seems to be playing that old mono 45 okay. So there you go. I hope you got something out of all this, and thank you Shango066 for sending this to me. I really appreciate it. And when I get the proper parts to fix this properly, whenever that is, then we'll have this thing back together, and it'll sure enough be a nice little record player. Alright, thanks for watching, and more to come later. Okay, this cartridge is made in Korea, so it probably is a low output ceramic, and I get a good buzz here at the amp inputs. That tells me the amp is sufficient. It just needs a decent crystal cartridge and it'll be good to go. Alright, it's Thursday morning and I dug around in my junk and I found a tone arm that looks a little more period correct for this. It's still a little newer than what came on it, but it looks better than that 1980s thing that was on it, and it's a better quality arm. It's not floppy like that one was, but unfortunately there's no cartridge installed and none of my cartridges that I have on hand will work. They won't fit this arm and they don't have enough output. What I rigged in temporarily had less output than what came out of it. This had one of those cartridges that was single-sided LP 3-volt crystal that was held in place by a set screw here, so I'm going to have to order one of those. And also, last night, in me being tired and not paying attention to what I was doing, I did something stupid. I installed a 35C5, or a 25C5 should have gone. And the 35C5 draws 150 milliamps, while the 25C5 draws 200 milliamps, and that just, you know, since the current draw has to be equal in a series circuit, then that's just not going to work. Yes, I probably have a 25C5 somewhere. I've looked a little bit. I can't find one. I'm not going to tear this shop apart trying to find one right now. So we're just going to have to, I hate to say it, but it'd be easier just to order one. They can't be that expensive. And I'll order the proper crystal cartridge for this, and then we ought to be good to go. I certainly hope so anyway. And by the way, I went back and re-watched Shango's video on this, and I really can't say that what I did to this today improved the performance any. All I really did was neaten up what somebody else did prior to Shango getting it and prior to me getting it. So what it's going to take now is to get the proper cartridge for this, and hopefully that'll pep it up a little bit. This amp is it's about as weak as one can get, and it needs a cartridge with all the output it can get to really do anything here. Okay, it suddenly dawned on me that there might be a record player within arm's reach that would have a 25C5 in it, and sure enough it did, so I just borrowed it out of a donor record player, so that's good. That'll save me from having to order one. And it might mean getting this record player fixed quicker. Okay, I replaced the screen grid resistor that was out of tolerance, and just as I predicted, it didn't bring the voltage up that much. I also replaced the selenium rectifier with a silicon diode. That brought it up a tad bit, but not enough to worry about. This 220 ohm resistor coming off of the rectifier, the original one was good, but if the rectifier was to short, this old carbon composition resistor would go up in flames and stink and smoke. So I installed one in there that won't do that. If this one goes open, it'll just open and that'll be the end of it. And because I'm sitting here getting disgusted, because this is not the old days when I could just run down to Hooper's and buy a universal kitty tone arm with a crystal cartridge in it for $3. It just really annoys me that when I need parts, I have to order stuff. You know, you just can't run down to the parts house and just pick up what you need anymore, because we don't carry that. Nobody wants that anymore. Well, yes, somebody does want it, me, and I expect it to be there. But anyway, what I've done for now, I just electrical taped the cartridge that come out of the tone arm that was on here. I hadn't even wired the left and right for mono. I'm just running one channel. And it plays, but I'm still having to turn the volume wide up to get anything out of it. And based on all the other cartridges I tried that appeared to be lower output than this one, then this one might actually be a higher output one, and it should probably do better than what it's doing. So we're going to look into this amp some more. The resistors that I took out of it appeared to be original equipment. It didn't look like anything that somebody had hacked in, but I'm just not happy with the voltage, like 60-something volts on the screen grid and 110 on the plate. I think we should have more than that. And I know there are some one-tube amplifiers that are more stout than this one is, so we're going to look into this some more. Here's another one-tube record player, a Beam DeVille from the mid-50s. I can't remember if I've shown this in a video or not. I might have, I don't know, but I've not modified the amplifier. I've redid the original circuit, and we installed a Crosley cartridge in this temporarily just for testing purposes. And the Crosley cartridge is good for like 0.3 volts output. Now we have it wide open. We also had the Symphonic wide open with a supposedly hotter cartridge in it. Now this 0.3 volt cartridge is driving this one-tube amplifier to about the same degree of volume as that higher output cartridge is driving the Symphonic. So I think we're going to open this up and we're going to examine the amplifier circuitry and see what differs about this one to this one here. Okay, there are some differences coming off of the rectifier. In this set we have an 82 ohm resistor, whereas the Symphonic had a 220 ohm resistor. And this screen grid dropping resistor, I'm having trouble seeing that, so we'll have to measure that. And our screen dropper is a 10K, and what do we say the one was in the Symphonic? 68K, I believe. So I think we're gonna substitute some resistor values. 82 ohm and 10K, as opposed to 220 ohm and 68K or whatever it was. And by the way, this particular record player is almost ready to go, except for me adding an FET preamp stage to it. Probably wondering, why don't you just add an FET preamp stage to this one? Because I know the cartridge that's in there ought to be hot enough to bump this amp to a degree of usefulness, and I'd like to get this original amp design up to par before I go adding any kind of preamp stages. Okay, I stand corrected. The screen resistor is a 10K in this one. The only thing that's different, this is a 220K, the one and the other one is an 82K, so I don't have any 82K, 82 ohms versus 220 ohms. I don't have any 82 ohms, so I think I'm just going to parallel a resistor across this one just to get it down. I'm now to the point where I'm not worried about if it's sloppy or not. I'm to the point of making it work. Everything will be soldered and won't nothing touch anything, so we're not going to worry about it. Okay, 150 and a 220 in parallel gives us 88. That's close enough for government work, as my old electronics instructor in college used to say. Now let's check some voltages and see what we get. Okay, that brought our B plus up to 132 for the plate and 80 for the screen grid. So let's see if we've got any more volume now. Okay, that helped a little bit. but it's certainly not earth-shaking. But that may be about as good as it's going to get for now until I get a known crystal cartridge that has a decent output. Okay, I just ordered a cartridge for this. I ordered one of the static 3-volt crystal cartridges with the single LP needle and set screw mount. I'd really like to, if possible, play 78s on this, but heck, I've got 78 players after 78 players, and as hard as it is to find crystal cartridges, I'll take what I can get. And I can't believe I've made it this far into the video without rolling some Mears Miller. I mean, on a record player that was given to me by Shango066, it would only be fitting to let some Mears Miller spin. So here's the album that our selected track is coming from today. Okay, there was a little bit of Mears Miller this afternoon, and we'll try to spin some more stuff by her before this video is concluded. So now I guess we sit here and wait on the mail truck to run and bring me a static crystal cartridge, and then we'll go from there. And this taped up mess here, here's a story you'll find amusing. Back in the early 2000s, there was a little hole-in-the-wall black gospel station here in town. In fact, I think it's still here if the FCC has reinstated their license. But they were probably the last station in town to put vinyl on the air. In fact, I got a couple of old turntables from them. That's how I got to know the owner of the joint. And he still had one old QRK turntable that he used on the air. And it had definitely seen better days. I ended up swapping him out, the QRK, for a Technics home turntable that I had. You know, they so rarely played records by that point that they didn't really need nothing heavy duty, but he wanted something there just in case he decided to play one. But anyway, the old QRK turntable had a Stanton 500 magnetic cartridge in it, and it was literally taped to the head shell with Scotch tape. The little mounting ears where you attach it with screws were broken off of the cartridge. Now, heaven only knows how that happened, but he had it held on with Scotch tape, and the needle was way past worn out. I tried to get him to let me order him a new cartridge. No, I'm not spending the money on that. What I've got works just fine. Well, okay, they're your records, and well, some of the records I got from that station were in very poor shape, so you can probably understand why. That was one of those stations that he wouldn't spend money on anything unless he had to. And then when he passed away and the new owners took it over, from what I was told, all of the old stuff they had got gutted and thrown out, and everything replaced with a computer and a new mixing board and all that. In fact, at one time I had the old Gates Yard tube audio console that came out of that station that he went on the air with in the mid-'80s, and I think it was replaced in the mid-'90s by a solid-state LPB board, and I stupidly sold the Gates Yard board, but I'm not so bummed out about it now as I was after finding that RCA tube broadcast mixer, but I'm not planning on getting rid of that one. It's staying here. Okay, while we're waiting on parts for the Symphonic to come in, I thought we'd go ahead and build a little preamp circuit to put in the beam record player. And since there's not enough room on the chassis to put any kind of preamp circuit, whether it be tube or solid state, had to crudely build one on this terminal strip, and we'll just mount it to the motor board. We'll mount it under the turntable platter, so with the turntable platter in place, you won't be able to see the screws, the bolts that are going to be holding this to the motor board, and hopefully everything will work out okay. Yeah, we're just going all different directions in this video, aren't we? But yeah, let's do another unboxing. We're not gonna work on what's in this box today, but while we're unboxing stuff, we might as well open this up. This was an eBay purchase that I needed, like I need a hole in the head, but I was able to get it for a reasonable price, and it is something kind of unique. So I went ahead and got it. Somebody stole my Country Crock privacy protection device, so I just had to use a piece of cardboard. I hope the cardboard is as effective as the 1995 Country Crock privacy protection device, but I guess that remains to be seen. But at least I still have my standard box opener. Okay. And you mean to tell me I actually bought something off of eBay that's in a real box and actually has bubble wrap around it? Yeah, there might be hope for the human race yet. Of course, it could still be packed better, but it could be a lot worse, too. What we have here is a Philco model 42 RP1. This is a wireless 78 RPM record player that transmits the modulation from the record being played to a nearby AM radio. These were popular for use with radios that obviously didn't have a built-in record player or a jack on the back to directly plug a record player attachment into the radio, so you could buy one of these wireless jobs and transmit to any radio within range. And obviously somebody has replaced the power cord. That's obviously not a 1942 power cord. Now, getting the chassis working and the turntable motor running properly shouldn't be an issue. But the biggest thing is going to be replacing this pickup cartridge. This is one of those old cartridges that track at about 90 grams, and there's no provision to add a counterbalance spring on the tone arm. Even mounting a newer cartridge in here, it would still track much too heavy, so my only option is probably going to be to up to $50 and have this cartridge rebuilt. But that'll come another day. Yes, I dared to plug it in. And this even has a light under the tone arm for illuminating the record surface, or the playing area of the record. This switch here is supposed to be spring-loaded, and when you lift the tone arm, it's supposed to activate the motor. But obviously something's fouled up there. I can pull it up, hold it up manually, and it runs, but if I let it go, it drops back down into the off position. Here's the chassis. This indeed has a power transformer, so this would be a good candidate for adding an external input jack. And since this has a switchable motor, you could leave the tone arm on its rest and plug an auxiliary input into the transmitter chassis and transmit another source other than the record into your AM radio. And this is a 2-tube job, uses a 6A7 for the oscillator and modulator, and I think this is an 84 for the rectifier. Peeking under the chassis, you can see someone did a very sloppy cord splice, but that'll be corrected later. Everything else looks to be original, or at least stuff that hasn't been touched lately. And when whoever replaced the power cord, it should have ran out here, but they ran it through here, so tell you what, we're just going to go ahead and cut this stubby cord off and be done with it. Where they had the cord coming out is actually the access hole for the trimmer that you use to adjust the transmit frequency. And I'd be willing to bet whoever did this was probably the eBay seller. They probably wanted to splice a cord onto it real quick to see if it would work, because, you know, if it spins around, that means it works, and that means it's worth more money. Although this one didn't get bid up to much. Usually these wireless Philco record players get bid up kind of high, but this one sold cheap. I guess we're during that summer slow portion of eBay, so, you know, that works to my advantage when I'm trying to get stuff. However, it doesn't work to my advantage when I have stuff on there for sale that all we're getting is a bunch of looky-loos and nobody hitting the buy it now button or placing a bid. Okay, back on the Beam record player, I have our preamp circuit mounted on this terminal strip, built on this terminal strip, and the terminal strip is mounted to the motor board, as you can see there. Now, of course, when the platter's on, you won't be able to see those bolts sticking up through there. And I find that, even as sloppy as this looks, it's still neater than building it on a phenolic board and just having it dangling off on here. In fact, this record player was kind of sloppily built from the factory. I mean, when you got a chassis this small, it's just a little bit bigger than the actual tube socket. There's going to be some sloppiness going on in order to fit everything in. Okay, we're ready to put the platter back on. As you can see, I've lubricated and cleaned the mechanism. This thing really doesn't get as loud as I'd like it to, but I think that's because of this lower output Crosley cartridge. If I put a 0.8 volt P228 cartridge in there, it would be louder. But guess what? I'm not going to worry about that. It gets louder than it did before, and frankly, I'm really getting kind of tired of making these one-tube wonder record players into something that they were never designed for in the first place, and then listing them on eBay, and then not being able to get enough out of them to even justify me even fooling with them. So I'm about to the point I'm just going to may keep one or two, and this may be one of the one or two that I keep, I don't know, but I'm going to quit concentrating my efforts on these cheapies. I'm going to concentrate my efforts on the better quality ones. But who knows, I could have a change of heart and completely change my mind by tomorrow. You never know.
It may and leave my daddy alone. If he has a dog, he won't be lonesome, and the doggy will have a good home. I don't want a bunny or a kitten.
And keep in mind, this is a Micro Groove Kitty 78 with 2 songs per side. Wouldn't be a good idea to really play conventional 78s unless you swap the needle out for one with a 78 tip. And like I said, I could put a 228 cartridge with a flip needle in there, but I'm just not going to. I mean, how much money are you going to sink into one of these things and then not being able to get it out of it?
Yip, yip, says hear me growl, but his growl is just a yowl. Even a pussycat would not be scared of that.
Yip, yip, he's full of pride. Then he sees a dog outside, feeling his...
Now back on the Symphonic, we're going to make this cartridge work one way or another. This is the one that came in the 80s tone arm that was on here, and I've already bridged the left and right together. Now all I got to do is look through my junk and try to find a mounting bracket. Mounting bracket, not a mountain bracket. And we might have to put a hole in the top of the tone arm for the screw to hold the bracket in, but we're going to make this work. I'm tired of waiting around on a replacement cartridge. I want to get this thing wrapped up. Okay, I think we're just about to a stopping point on this. Let me tell you what happened off camera. I took the plastic arm, drilled a little hole in the top to mount the Korean cartridge that was on this player from the minute I got it. Installed everything nice and neat and put it all together and tried to play a record, and the cartridge just went from playing okay to distortion city to very little output. checked the amp, determined the amp was good. The Korean cartridge just went to pot all of a sudden. So I ripped that tone arm off and threw it away since I'd already ruined it anyway by drilling a hole in it. It looked ugly anyway at this point. And that wasn't a new tone arm. It was one that, look what I've done, went and splashed solder on my record player, yeah. But anyway, that was just some old junker tone arm anyway. Well, by that time I was really disgusted, so I just took another record player from the 50s that was a one-tube wonder, but it had this nice metal static tone arm on it that looks just like the ones that was used on the talking book players from the 60s. The crystal cartridge in it was dead, so I just installed an 89T cartridge in this. That's the school record player cartridge, and it's rated for 1.3 volts output, and this already has more volume than what the original had. It's not top notch, but it's not whisper quiet like it was.
I don't want to lose her. Help me build a she can take what I dish out, and that's not easy.
We can just about live with that. So I don't even think I'm going to install a preamp stage in here. I'm just going to let it go and be done with it. I can keep using this kitty record because I don't think it's copyrighted. All the rest of what I've been using, I'm having to alternate around records and use short segments of them because I don't want any copyright claims.
Pokey, 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 pokey. Where's Pokey?
Where's that pokey little puppy?
The pokey little puppy, he just pokes along.
And I also did some research on the cartridge that came out of this thing, the Korean cartridge. Apparently it is a high output cartridge. I found an ad on eBay for somebody selling the exact same tone arms, and that cartridge I believe is rated for 2 volts, which means it should be louder than this 1.3 volt cartridge, and it wasn't, so that tells me that it had gotten weak. And the nice thing about this tone arm, it has standard half-inch mounting, so I can get one of the half-inch mount 3-volt crystal BSR cartridges if I choose to, and just slap it in there and be done with it. I also looked at several schematics of these one-tube wonders, and there were some that indeed used a 220 ohm resistor coming off of the rectifier. You know, I think these things were basically designed, some of them were designed to have more gain than others, and that was done purposely because since kids were using a lot of these, they made them on purpose so they wouldn't get loud enough to disturb everybody in the house. Now regarding the little red GE record player, I know I said I was going to put it on eBay, but I've decided not to right now. For the simple reason, I think it'd be a waste of time. We're in August. We're in that month where nobody's spending any money on eBay. And I already have a record player listed on there right now that nobody's doing anything on except watching it and looking at it. They're certainly not hitting the buy it now button. So, you know, there's really no need in me listing anything else on there right now when there's one already on there that's not going anywhere. Perhaps when things cool off and wallets start opening up a little wider, then I'll put some stuff on there. But it's like I've said before, you know, I can't invest money in this stuff and time and sell it for $5 or $10 on eBay. I'm not trying to make a killing, but I'm trying to at least get some of my money back. Now this record player here, I'm hanging on to it because it was a gift from Shango, and I really appreciate it very much, and I'd like to hang on to this. And I also like the looks of it. You know, it's not your average boring-looking one-tube wonder like this brown thing here that I took the metal tone arm off of.
No, I felt ashamed, there was no one else to blame. I was just a victim of this foolish game. I gave to you all that I had, there is nothing more to add. I don't want your company. Of this world, of this mind, of this love for you. And I'm on my way. I'm taking my time, but I don't know where. Without a rose, the queen of Corona. See me and Julio down by the schoolyard. And you're from Dixie, ready for Dixie. Cause this old boy from Dixie too, dropping on the floor.
Into my room he creeps without making a sound. Into my dreams he peeps.
So I sing you sleep. After the loving, I brush back the hair from your eyes.
Okay, still need to clean and lube the drive mechanism. I'll do that later. It's working fine for now. And like I promised, we're going to spin some more Ms. Miller in honor of Shango066. And hope you got something out of all of this, and we'll get to something else later.